Welcome, everybody. So for live tarot readings, we did this last month. It was really fun. I really love the chance to be able to demonstrate my use of the cards. So maybe I'll just do a little disclaimer or laying out the ground a little bit about how I work with tarot and the ways in which I like to utilize the cards. If you're familiar with my work, you probably know that I operate, most from an archetypal perspective, from a Jungian psychological perspective. And my use of tools like tarot is always to help deepen your awareness of whatever situation of life it is that you're coming to the tarot with, and to utilize the symbols, the images of the cards to deepen into the psyche and its many layers. Because the tarot is an archetypal system, the images that have come forth have this direct link into the collective unconscious, and that can not only expand our conscious perspective, it can help us understand what kind of archetypes might be constellated or activated in our life. It can help us understand different influences that might be present that we weren't aware of before. It can make us aware or alert us to certain shadows or dynamics like that. So, the way that I use the cards is very guidance focused. It's really about empowering you to understand dynamics more clearly and more deeply so that you can consciously choose the type of approach or action that you want. So that's to say that the cards are never used for fortune telling or to predict a type of future, but rather to expand the archetypal field, help us be aware of it. So you'll sort of see me demonstrating this as I draw cards and answer questions. Just checking the chat here. As I said, for those who are just joining, welcome. We're doing live tarot readings today. If you are a member of the Artemisian and you want to ask a question, please drop it in the chat. I will be checking here on my phone, and we're also going to start with some inquiries that were submitted ahead of time. So I actually wanted to start with a question. That is also welcome today. You can do an inquiry on an area of life, keeping it fairly open-ended, focused on yourself or what you're looking to gain in terms of insight. Or if you have a very general question about tarot or related topics, you can also ask that today. So one question that a member submitted ahead of time is, will you be teaching a basics of tarot anytime soon? Great question. This is something actually I've been thinking about for a little while because the request has come in a few times. I've taught beginners into intermediate and advanced classes of tarot many times over the years, but we haven't really done that so much in the Artemisian, or I haven't done it that much recently. What I'm considering doing is actually running a program outside of the Artemisian's membership, so it would be available publicly for anybody to sign up, and likely it would be something like a more involved program, maybe 4 weeks of us really diving deep into the cards, learning the structures, learning a psychological and archetypal approach that I use, strengthening your skills, building your symbolic literacy of the cards. And that would give us a really nice container with hopefully enough amount of time for you to really build a really powerful foundation for utilizing the cards for inner work. So that's what I'm thinking. I would love to hear your feedback. If that sounds like something that you would be interested in, please let me know. Of course, in the Artemisian's membership, I'm always kind of cycling through different modalities and utilizing those for our studies with our monthly workshops. So if I don't end up doing a more involved program, I will certainly do kind of skills or basics of tarot, just how earlier this year we did a Dreamwork Foundations class. So anyways, let me know your thoughts there. And let's get started. For anyone new just joining in, if you are a member today and you would like a tarot reading, which I'm doing live, please ask your inquiry in the chat. So to kick things off, I have a question here from a member. They say, I've been feeling stuck, down on myself, comparing to others with my career path and ability to expand to the next level. How can I reignite my passion, faith, and motivation? So really great question here. One that clearly seems to have a lot of meaning, emotional charge, feeling a stuckness, feeling down on yourself. Whenever you feel like you're kind of caught in those situations and you just keep kind of like running into that wall, that's always a wonderful time to draw upon your divinatory tools or your archetypal modalities to help you get outside of the conscious perspective. So to repeat this question, this member has been feeling stuck and down on themselves. They've been comparing themselves to other people in regards to their career path and the ability to expand into the next level. How can I reignite my passion, faith, and motivation? So just shuffling through the cards right now. And last time I did one card for all of the readings, and I wanted to sort of demonstrate a little bit more of a depth and a different way of reading by drawing 2 cards, maybe for each reading. I don't know, it depends, but at least right now, and especially with the way that I read tarot, is a very fluid, no set spreads, no static meaning of what the cards are when I draw them. I just kind of create a reading as I go. And so right now, my intention with drawing cards is to see which come up and what their meaning is, how they kind of flow and augment one another, how they complement or contrast one another. What kind of insights do I get by working with both of those cards? So the 10 of Pentacles coming up and the 8 of Cups. So I'm going to start here actually with the 10 of Pentacles. That's the first one that came out. So the members mentioned feeling stuck, feeling down on themselves about the career path. And so it's interesting to pull a Pentacles card, which is the element of earth and tends to get into some of those more practical, everyday aspects of life, career, finances, health, well-being, the things that really ground you. And when I think about the 10 of Pentacles, it is a card of arrival. It's a card that marks the end of the cycle of the progression of the minor arcana and is usually speaking to stability, achievement, the kind of abundance that is long lasting, and it isn't going to just sort of slip into the ether as the next cycle turns around. It's about what we're growing and building in our life and how that's going to take shape to be the main that main foundational point, right? That main guiding structure that holds all of these other elements. And so when I think about this member's question about how to reignite passion and faith and motivation, it feels like a step back towards what an ultimate aim or goal is, because the 10 of Pentacles, as I mentioned, it's the end of the cycle of that minor arcana. We begin at Ace, we end at 10. And that closing kind of speaks to a purpose, an aim, that which you are trying to achieve, at least on a certain level before the cycle begins again. And so what is this greater vision of your career path? You've mentioned that you're feeling stuck, you're feeling down on yourself. It makes me wonder if there is not some sort of gap between where it is you're hoping to be and where you are. And I'm curious, like, what is in this space in between those? What is the dynamic that feels so disconnected? Do you feel that you've ended up, for example, at the wrong company, at the wrong team, it's the wrong fit, right? Or are you feeling like the career itself is not the right place for you to be? Do you have an idea or a vision for yourself, but you've just yet to achieve it and you're feeling like things are too slow? Those are all questions that I would pose, to that member if they were sitting with me, but not having them there to have that dialogue. I kind of put that forward to just show that the card is pointing towards, that the ability to kind of reconnect to faith and motivation and passion is to look at this overall kind of arc of what you're building and why, and to really understand what it is that feels out of alignment. Because I wonder if it's not just comparison to others. I know that the member mentioned this in their inquiry as an issue or something that's affecting them at this time, but to me, the Ten of Pentacles, isn't so much about comparisons, and maybe you aren't achieving what you think you should achieve based on what your peers are achieving, but something about the entire holding structure of what you're growing and why. And then there's the Eight of Cups here coming in as well. And this kind of adds a little extra layer and interest to me, some nuance, because the Eight of Cups tends to show up when we are in a situation of relative safety, relative normalcy. Things are okay, things are going all right, but there is a sense that things are not quite the right fit anymore. Things no longer feel deeply passionate. You don't feel that your spirit is as present with the work. Maybe it doesn't feel like a vocational calling. And the Eight of Cups comes up to say it's time to leave some certain dynamic behind and move on to something greater. And that feels very aligned with this idea of wanting to expand to a new level that member was talking about. And the question then is, what is it that needs to be left behind? What do you need to walk away from? Because the figure on the Eight of Cups is journeying towards something higher, something greater, that next level of achievement. Usually this isn't so much about just pure aspirations or things that you want to check off, your list of things that you want to do or your goals, but something much more deeply fulfilling, something much more spiritually or soulfully fulfilling that the figure on the Eight of Cups is journeying towards. So if there can be a kind of connection to what seems to be missing in work right now, are you perhaps feeling stuck or feeling down on yourself because there's something misaligned here? And if you're putting in energy and resources towards developing something really powerful and meaningful in your life, like the sustaining career that, will take you through, this feels like the right time to make adjustments if it's obvious what those are. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to, leave your job behind. Sometimes what we're leaving in the Eight of Cups are certain expectations, certain beliefs, certain inner dynamics, right? But it might be external as well. So these two paired together are bringing up those major themes of what we're building towards and why. Something sustainable, something abundant, something that can nourish us with that Ten of Pentacles, and the realization that something is just really not working anymore. And it's time to kind of move towards something greater, to align that with what you're building and why, and to sort of see what actions can be taken by that. Because the eights in the tarot are generally representative of movement, development, energy picking up again, especially if it's felt very caught up or very stuck. In this case, we get things moving by recognizing what in the current environment is really no longer fitting, what no longer serves, what we need to move away from, what we need to build out of. So those are our two cards for that member, the Ten of Pentacles, the Eight of Cups. And I'm just going to check the comments here. If you are a member and you have an inquiry, I welcome you to drop that in the chat, and I would love to be able to read for you. Okay, unfortunately I have to do this on my phone, so it's like not as smooth, but I see an inquiry here. Okay, so I'm gonna put these cards back in the deck. So the inquiry says that I'm a caregiver for my daughter and I would like guidance for how I can avoid the burnout I feel some days that feels very heavy and oppressive. Okay, thank you for your inquiry. That, the framing here of recognizing that the weight of responsibility of caretaking, in this case for your daughter, is leading to burnout, or it feels quite oppressive, quite limiting. The framing there is really wonderful in knowing exactly kind of where you are in that space of this life situation. And as we turn towards the cards, I'm curious of what kind of antidote can be provided to that, because I imagine that with a situation like this, there is no easy, clean flip of a switch and boom, things are different. It's probably going to be a very nuanced kind of way to work within this dynamic. The first card jumping out is the Four of Pentacles reversed. this is interesting because the fours in the tarot are all about structure and grounding and holding containers. But the Four of Pentacles gets into a really interesting place where when it's upright, it tends to say how the things that we're pouring our energy into, that which we're holding very close, feels like it's building our resources. It's kind of that time of holding back or being a little bit prudent and knowing, okay, yes, this is where I can extend and this is where I can hold back, or maybe this is a time to conserve energy. And when it's reversed, we get into a little bit of the tensions around that, the weight, especially of, the Pentacles responsibility that feels like it's holding us down. And with the Four being about structures and, limitations that usually feel like they are supportive, this makes me wonder about what kind of structures you have built into the caretaking that are contributing to the burnout, if that makes sense. So is it that you are the sole individual who is tasked with every day, doing what needs to be done for your daughter in this case, cooking meals, helping bathe them, changing clothes, running errands, right? These are the kind of structures and boundaries that happen in the tarot fours that usually are supposed to be supportive to us, generative, help us feel good and nourished. In this reversal, I'm wondering how that energy is being expended and not being returned back, and where within these structures might you be able to make adjustments or bring in other support or help, because the sense here is that it's going to continue to kind of siphon off that energy of your own potential or of your own focus, and you won't be able to continue to carry that for as long as maybe your daughter needs that help and support. So here the Four of Pentacles reverse, really just speaking to what structures are in place and how is that affecting your ability to navigate this without leading to the burnout? It's really interesting. I just recorded an podcast episode on burnout that'll be out in about 2 weeks. So that would definitely be a really great listen. But one sort of takeaway that we talk about with burnout in that episode is how, first and foremost, it tends to alert us to what kind of resource that we're missing in life. And so that might be spiritual resource, might be a financial resource, emotional resource, mental resources, right? And there's something continuously drawing and drawing and drawing upon that resource and not being replenished. In the case of the Pentacles, we are looking at really fundamental resources here. And this might be actual money that's being pulled. It might be our time. It might be our own sort of energy of life that feels like now we don't have the capacity anymore to kind of take up our own, everyday responsibilities. So, usually when this card is upright, we're building and shoring up resources in a way that helps us know when to move out and spend it, and to be able to kind of invest where we need to invest. So this energy feels like very trapped in a kind of dynamic that's both limiting it and at the same time draining it at the same time. And I'm going to go ahead and pull a second card, since we're doing two at the same time, just to kind of build on that and see if there isn't a kind of path forward given that Four of Pentacles reverse. So the card popping out of the deck is the Two of Swords. When the Two of Swords comes up, things tend to feel very dualistic. And we can sort of see here in both the reflection of the number 2 that there is this crossing of her arms and the swords pointing in each direction. It can sometimes feel when this card is up, should I do this or should I do that? Is this the right thing or is this the wrong thing? It feels very black and white. And the reality of life is things are very, very gray. But there is a choice here. The twos in the tarot represent basically when complexity is brought into a situation, and now what are we going to do with it? How are we going to balance those dynamics? How are we going to weave them together and have a synthesis that takes us to the expansion and the creative principle of the number 3? So what I would first sort of counsel with this Two of Swords is to maybe boil it down to sort of some simplified options of how you can move forward, of kind of opening up this energy and bringing resource back into yourself so that you don't burn out, but to also do so by not getting too caught up in all of the external details, because the figure in the Two of Swords is blindfolded, and I've always seen this as an expression of her going inward into self, almost kind of tapping into a more unconscious, subtle, implicit flow that helps you move forward, helps you make those decisions and know the right path to take. Because when we're kind of so embedded in a situation and we're feeling very stuck, which Two of Swords can show, like, I feel so stuck and I don't know, I'm sort of at this crossroads, should I go this way or should I go that way? By kind of closing our eyes to that overwhelm or that intensity, or even the kind of embodied experience of it, and going deeper into the kind of, you know, the water, the moon really showing us that we're falling back into the unconscious and looking for the wisdom or the image or the guiding symbol, it can help break the tension and move us out of this dynamic to see what it is that we need to do. So, you know, to kind of recap that, I would look towards sort of seeing, yes, are there current paths that are emerging, whether that's bringing somebody else in for some support so that the resources aren't constantly being placed upon you, or the responsibility isn't constantly being placed upon you. What are those options? But then holding those options with a kind of lightness, or making sure that we don't move into too much of a duality of it's only this or it's only that. It's kind of laying out the groundwork, seeing what the map is, and then moving into a kind of inward space of reflection that's going to help you move forward, and then to kind of become more decisive with that decision too, because the swords allow us to move through uncertainty, break through tension, mental strife, by wielding that symbol of the sword, which is definite. You know, it's clarity bringing, it makes things very, very clear. And this would say, like, what is the line that's sort of being drawn in the sand, but making sure that you're going through that process first and foremost before you jump into it, because you can get very caught up in the overwhelm if you don't go into that inner space. Okay, I hope that's helpful. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And thank you for asking. I'm going to check here with the chat again and see what other questions we've got. Okay, so another inquiry here. I have an issue with someone where we both want to be together, yet the circumstances of life seem destined to keep us apart. It's even possible that we have unconsciously chosen each other because it's impossible. Have possibly chosen each other unconsciously because it's impossible. Maybe, I see. So maybe, not totally sure if that's an unconscious drive. Interested in a reading on this. Sounds like a very complicated and painful situation. I'm really curious, you know, as you bring this up and saying, like, perhaps there has been an unconscious sort of choosing of one another that brings that forth. Whenever that kind of dynamic feels present, my question is always why, because the unconscious usually seeks those kinds of situations to break through a pattern, or to recognize something within yourself that you perhaps keep not necessarily enacting or perpetuating, but it's serving some sort of purpose, right? You know, especially when there's a kind of unconscious activation between individuals and relational dynamics that seem to speak to that, there's much more than meets the eye consciously. So is it, you know, the unconscious is just doing this just to torture you both? I don't think so. What is the greater telos? What is the greater purpose? What are you being called to recognize? And perhaps recognizing that would help actually break this tension and lead to some coming together. Anyways, none of that based on the cards, just on my own sort of intuitive flow around those ideas. But we're going to shuffle through and see what we get around that. I'm also curious if there's been dreams around this kind of dynamic, is when you have that really intense, unconscious, activated material, it's showing up in all sorts of places. Okay, I'm just gonna pull a second card here. Okay, so the first card coming up is the Queen of Pentacles in her reverse position. The Queen, like the King, represent maturity and realization of their suit. And the Queen, and I'll just show her upright in this case, you know, represents a kind of psychological development and maturity that allows us to have the kind of depth of connection that nurtures us, that nourishes us, that allows us to feel connected and fed and resourced to reach out further. It's a wonderful card for both, I think, relational dynamics, but the kind of more subtle nourishment of life that we feel on all of these levels, right? Spiritual, mental, emotional. And she's coming up reversed. And, you know, the queens to me also represent a type of depth of relatedness and how we relate to others that allows their connections to stay balanced, to stay in a place where they can continue to deepen over time. And we see all different versions of that with the different queens, the wands, the cups, the swords, the pentacles queens. They show us different variations of that relating principle. So there feels like there's something within that relating structure here specific to the pentacles realm that has a tension, that has a wound, that has some sort of distortion. Whenever, you know, reversals come up for me, I tend to view them in a couple of different ways, not just in an opposing or in a shadowy meaning. Sometimes I see the reversals as this capacity or this energy of life that could be accessible, but for some reason is blocked or in development or has been cut off for some reason. So the fact that a Queen of Pentacles is here at all to me feels very interesting, feels like opportunity. But what is causing this block here? Some of the thoughts just kind of coming up to me right now as I look at this card and consider that there seems to be such a deep desire on both ends, I assume, based on what you said, to connect and to be together. And yet at the same time, there's something very core, perhaps something even within the archetype of the mother, being that there's a Queen of Pentacles out, that feels sort of wounded. So we might look even towards the mother complex in this case. Is there something that created a wound, created a distortion that has affected the ability for a rooted relational structure to come together and for it to nourish and hold and deepen and provide as the Queen of Pentacles usually would? I don't know if this is mirrored within the two individuals. I don't know if it's in one or the other, but I would think that the Queen of Pentacles is sort of calling our attention to something within that relational structure that is supposed to nourish, that is supposed to provide, that can be this kind of home that we feel both inwardly and outwardly with others, and yet there's a barrier to it. So maybe that brings up some thoughts for you as you consider that. Maybe you feel that reflected more inwardly for yourself. Maybe you see that reflected in your partner, or maybe there is something like almost like a Venn diagram of here's me and here's them and here's the overlap where that Queen of Pentacles reverse sits. The card paired with this Queen of Pentacles reverse is the Eight of Pentacles. This feels intriguing to me. We have two pentacles here, so there's a concentration in that realm of the earth element. So here is the grounding, the roots. Here is the place where we can build the kind of foundations of life that can feel deeply, deeply providing and nourishing, and, you know, not just in the place of, you know, we can build a home together, or I can, you know, get this job and, you know, afford my life. When I go deeper with the pentacles, it's always, to me, it's the spirit in matter, which is very alchemical, right? It's, you know, something that ignites us from, you might say, from, the crown chakra all the way down to the root chakra, or from the place of feet on the earth, and feeling all of those powerful foundations, and how that makes you feel more aligned in life than ever before. So this isn't just about the practical details and those kinds of dynamics that tend to come up with the pentacles. To me, it's getting into the heart of something, so that the true sort of psychological dynamic, the spiritual dynamic, can really take root as well. Anyways, so with that said, the Eight of Pentacles feels like the call to action. Once again, we have another 8 coming out in a reading. So this is movement. This is getting into the thick of it. This is working on what has been presented, because there is a potentiality for things to grow, to develop, and to reach a kind of level of hopefully attainment that I think you're really looking for. The Eight of Pentacles tends to be associated with hard work, with developing skills, the journeyman who's getting on his way to becoming a master of his trade. When we apply that to a relational dynamic, this to me feels like, what are the core issues? How can we hone in on that and begin to focus and dedicate ourselves to that, and to see it as the kind of prima materia that might right now feel sort of uncomfortable, might lead to this feeling of maybe things aren't quite right. But when worked upon, right, with dedication, with focus, with care, it is bound to evolve into something greater. Because that's what the individual in the Eight of Pentacles doing, is a focused, labored effort to see something come to fruition that feels, far off from attainment. But it says that if you can do that, if you can keep at it, if you can work upon it, you are going to get to that place that you want to go. So Queen of Pentacles reverse, sort of calling to maybe some sort of core issue, needing to identify where that is. And then the Eight of Pentacles as the call to action, the focused, bringing it fully into view. And once you identify really what that is, it would be like, the commitment to working on that. I don't think I used that word yet, but to me, the Eight of Pentacles is deep commitment to the work. In this case, maybe relational work that can repair what feels like a rupture, and in hopes kind of get the Queen of Pentacles into her upright position. Okay, that's the reading. Hope that is helpful. Let me know your thoughts, and I'm just going to take a look here at the chat, see if there are any other inquiries. If you're just joining, once again, welcome. We're doing live tarot readings for members. If you have a question, please drop it in the chat. Okay, response here from this reading that we just did. It seems incredibly insightful in ways that are very synchronous. You're very welcome. I'm very glad to hear that. And one thing that the tarot does is it evokes synchronicity. It works on the principle of synchronicity. It allows there to be an opening between an internal situation and to be met meaningfully in the outer world through the drawing of the cards. And I think most people who do tarot or know about tarot experience this, that there's this uncanny ability for the cards drawn at random to speak very powerfully to the moment, to even hone in on something that, nobody else knew. That's the mystery, right? Of the beauty of the tool, I think, and how it works, how it does that, is through that Jungian principle of synchronicity. Okay, I don't see another inquiry in the chat, so I'm gonna just pull up the submitted inquiries really quick. So this member says, how can I overcome the Seven of Swords energy I get with my anxiety? They're feeling defensive of late. Interesting question, because they're already pulling out a card. So what I'm going to do is actually look through my deck, draw out the Seven of Swords here. If you don't know much about the Seven of Swords, most people don't like it. Very traditionally has to do with deception and kind of hidden motives, and what are the things that you are taking that you shouldn't be taking. It's not a very nuanced take on the Seven of Swords, but there is something about this card that really does speak to this situation, either internally or externally, where there isn't as much of an explicit, forthright, you know, very obvious way in which we are navigating a situation and why. And there tends to be this sort of pulling back that feels like it sort of undermines ourselves or a situation. On the flip side, on a kind of positive sense, I tend to see the Seven of Swords come up as almost, like the lone wolf is maybe like the best term to use for it. How are you breaking from what has been and carving out a path, perhaps in a way that does not involve others? Maybe they don't understand why it is that you're doing, but there's a kind of focusedness to it, a need to kind of take what you know is required and forge that path ahead that is part of that dynamic. So we kind of hold multiple potentialities and realities with the Seven of Swords. It can be deceptive, it can be something that's driving a kind of negative dynamic inwardly or outwardly, but it can also be powerful in certain regards. In this case, the Seven of Swords seems to be driving some sort of anxiety for this member, a defensiveness. So maybe there's a sense of whenever there's a confrontation or some sort of dynamic of life, maybe there's like a quick pulling away that's happening. I'd be very curious to hear what that member has to say about Seven of Swords and where do they feel like it's playing out, but how can they overcome it? So let's take a look at a card or two and see what it has to say. Okay, so two cards popping out of the deck right now, Three of Pentacles reverse and the Six of Pentacles. We've been drawing a lot of Pentacles, so I don't know what's up with that, but that must be the dynamic that we're all plugged into as of late. Starting with the Three of Pentacles reversed. Oh, this is interesting to me. When this card is upright, it's about how we're coming together in our differences, how the tensions that might even be born out of opposing point of views, different skill sets, the ways in which you feel that kind of isolation from others is actually constructive. Does that make sense? With the Three of Pentacles, we see the monk, we see the stonemason, we see the architect, and they're constructing this greater foundation of a cathedral together. Each of them have a role to play. Each of them have, strengths and weaknesses, different parts of themselves that are needed to create a kind of balance as they come together. And that sort of development is really powerful when it's upright. What is happening when sort of anxiety is present for you, or that Seven of Swords energy that maybe is making you pull away? I'm not sure if that feels like, something that is happening, because the Three of Pentacles should be collaborative. It should be that you're building, constructing, aligning with shared purpose with other individuals when those come together, or with parts of self. And that's where I want to bring a little bit of nuance, because sometimes the Three of Pentacles shows up to say the parts of yourself that you want to deny or that you don't see as worthy or that are troublesome are also a part of the equation. And maybe that feels more relevant than this Seven of Swords dynamic is causing issues outwardly. Maybe it's a little bit of both. How do we bring into the fold these, this part of you, that Seven of Swords part of yourself that also is part of the psychic structure, right? Part of your life, part of your psyche. With this card coming up reversed, it feels like something about that is being sabotaged, and that's another way that the Seven of Pentacles is sometimes looked at, as this sort of saboteur, this, being too crafty, being too undermining, that kind of cuts things out from right below where you didn't realize where it was doing it. And so does the Seven of Swords feel self-sabotaging to you when anxiety is kind of coming up? Because if it is undermining or undercutting something that wants to be built in life that could have a whole kind of depth of meaning to it, because when the Three of Pentacles is upright, when it gets really rooted in life, we really see something really powerful and very beautiful coming into shape. What is it that is being developed and constructed? What is the art? What is the relational dynamic? What is, the work dynamic? I don't know what it could be, but it's coming together collaboratively through multiple different areas to build something of depth and meaning that can provide for both you and others who are a part of it. So Seven of Swords, perhaps it's self-sabotaging this kind of dynamic. Another element that we want to look into, the second card here, is the Six of Pentacles. This is the card that kind of speaks to where the where it is that you sit on the scale. Maybe I'll just say that first, because the individual who's upright, kind of providing for these individuals lower, is in a place and in a situation of relative ease, resourced, feeling balanced, so that they can provide to the parts of self that are wounded. What's interesting is this card is coming upright. To me, that focuses the reading a little bit more towards you're more resourced than you think, or there are resources available there to tap into. And perhaps this Seven of Swords saboteur, who is trying to maybe break out of the system or break away or create some havoc internally and drive anxiety, is needing some of this support. And what is the dynamic that happens when you try to engage that part of yourself? Do you start to feel overwhelmed? Do you feel like you don't know how to do that process? Internally, if you don't feel that you have that capacity, I would think that the Six of Pentacles is sort of speaking to that latent potentiality within you, and it might be important to consider how you can strengthen that container, which might be kind of going outward to, find support with loved ones, with a therapist or a guide, strengthening up the inner work so that you feel that you have the capacity to move into this and really, continue to build that Three of Pentacles. And that if you feel, more like every time you try to engage it, you're in that place of feeling overwhelmed, maybe feeling like I just don't have it in me. The Six is saying, how do we get back into that balance? How do we bring, those scales, if it's feeling like it keeps going like this, back into an equilibrium? So where can the resources be found? Internally, if you don't feel them, this to me almost feels like a dream that shows up in a time of intensity, and it kind of shows you being resourced, and then you wake up and you're like, well, I don't feel that. Oftentimes, the emergent potentials within the unconscious rise in these forms through image, through symbol, in dream, in the cards, and speak to, in this kind of prospective way, this forward-looking way, what is there, what the potential is, what could be drawn out of the unconscious. So upright, the Six of Pentacles really feels like your ability to navigate that Seven of Swords dynamic and to, I don't want to say overcome it. It feels like it needs to be integrated into this, it needs to be part of the equation more, maybe not villainized as more, maybe to sort of see what the energy is at the center of that, whether it's something that feels overwhelmed, something that feels wounded, something that feels abandoned, right? I'm curious about the voice of that Seven of Swords figure, what they would have to say. Okay, so Three of Pentacles reverse, Six of Pentacles upright for that reading. It's going to take a look here at our chat. Okay, I got another question here. Is there a way for me to balance the call for me to slow down from previous readings and my deep desire to learn by taking more courses? Okay, so the tension, right, between seemingly oppositional forces of life. I think a lot of us can relate to that. Oftentimes when that happens, when we feel a kind of polarization, it's usually not one way or the other, but a kind of synthesis of the two that we usually find by holding the tension is like a very Jungian idea, is that if we recognizing and are consciously aware of, in this case, like grow, depth, expand, more courses, learning with slowing down, if you can hold those consciously, something tends to emerge that bridges the two of them. With that said, I'm not sure what the cards are going to say. So let's take a look. Okay, got one card and two coming out. Okay, the first card jumping out, the Lovers. The Lovers is definitely more than just, powerful relationships in our life, and finding someone who reflects that kind of deep soulmate connection. The Lovers is a card of deep union, of really truly meeting parts of ourselves that seem, in this case, we're kind of talking about the polarization or the oppositional dynamic. There are two figures here. So we might say one represents the part of yourself that wants to slow down and maybe needs to take a step back, and the other one represents, wanting to go deeper, wanting to learn, wanting to expand. They're both here. They're both needing to be present. How do we build a kind of line of communication between them to see that there needs to be cooperation, I might say, that there needs to be a harmony woven between the two of them if you want to move forward, because their union, what is born from the Lovers, is something that is made up of both of them. So what kind of choices can you make considering both the need to slow down and the desire to expand and move forward? How can those both be a part of the equation so that as you move forward, you're kind of checking in with both sides? Because, another really classic way that we look at the Lovers is it's about choice. It's about, making very conscious choices through deep understanding and deep relating, and knowing that you've got to kind of move forward. You can't kind of stay stuck where you are, but it's not necessarily the just choosing the one or the other. The key word, the sort of seed, image that I love to use with the Lovers is that of union. So I'm very curious what could be born from both of these impulses within you that contains the both of them. Specifically, and to sort of contrast this against, the Temperance card, which would say that perhaps there's a blending that sort of merges the two of them and creates something wholly new. This to me feels that I want to almost keep these polarized impulses clearly separated, but as part of the conversation. Does that make sense? Because, when Temperance comes up, it kind of gives rise to something completely new that is, it's like its own new being that's, half this and half that, and it's this merged dynamic. The Lovers, it stays separate in a way, which almost feels that you can kind of move into one side and then move into the other, and both of those can exist in harmony together. You don't have to just take a step back and rest or go inward or whatever it is, or you don't only have to expand, take more courses, do more study. You can do both. That's kind of what I'm getting from the Lovers right now. The second card coming up, once again, another Pentacles card. So interesting. The Five of Pentacles. The fives in the tarot represent challenge points, but challenges as a greater calling to awareness, as a certain hurdle that we need to get over to understand what needs to be met or understood to get to that place of realization that we're hoping to get to. In the case of the Five of Pentacles, it is calling attention to the ways in which you might feel, and this might kind of play into the one side of wanting a break or wanting to slow down. What is it that feels under-resourced in the case of the Five of Pentacles? Sometimes it comes up when we're experiencing some sort of, I don't have the energy. Maybe you've been sick lately. This is like very practical examples. Sometimes when there's financial strain or stress, some sort of scarcity that you're feeling, So sometimes it's really practical. It's very explicit. I lost my job, Five of Pentacles, or I, came down with an illness, Five of Pentacles. But it's not always that, because as we said earlier, the pentacles are more than just the material. It's also the spirit within matter. So is there a sense of scarcity, of loss, of not having enough, whether that's not enough time or energy or focus, that's driving that? Because the Five of Pentacles isn't just, oh, you're experiencing that feeling and that's what it is. It's how can you meet that challenge, or what are you being called to understand about it? How is it part of the process of development and transformation, and what is it tasking you to do? Oftentimes in the Five of Pentacles, it's to realize that there's more kind of there for you than you realize. We're almost sort of stuck in a tunnel vision when the Five of Pentacles shows up, and we're sort of on this singular path when the reality is that there's more there that we can access. So where are you feeling that kind of scarcity? I don't know if that's the right word that you would use, but where is that lack coming from that might drive that feeling of, let me just pull up your words here, the call for you to slow down versus the deep desire to learn. I'm curious what slowing down is and why, because the slowing down, is it, because you're feeling like you've just got too much going on, you don't have enough to keep giving? This feels like an opportunity to understand what's driving that and why, and to, if it's met, it will be able to help you kind of move forward and continue this path. So the Lovers is the invitation to kind of hold both of those realities, and perhaps to find a united path between them, where you might be able to say, I make a conscious choice about what I'm choosing to bring in. Say, like, I sign up for a course. I know that it's going to ask this much of me, and I carve out time here to rest and to integrate, to slow down, to make sure I'm really metabolizing the material, right? I'm not even sure if what we're talking about is, an energy or, mind resource, right? I've just got too much. Maybe it's just you've taken in so much and now things want you to slow down. And so stop putting more on your plate. Perhaps that's what we're exploring here. But the path forward, I think, can involve the two of them together with the Lovers card. There is a harmony that can exist with both of these dynamics. But I think it really does come down to understanding why there is this challenge point here. This to me feels like it relates more to the slowing down part than to the wanting to expand and go deeper part. So what is driving that and why? What is it calling you to? What is it needing you to meet in yourself so that you can continue forward? Because the Five is only halfway through. It's partway through, the arc of transformation that we experience with the Minor Arcana. Okay, thank you for your question. Okay, just gonna take a look, see if we have any more. I'm gonna just quickly jump to the submitted inquiries because there's one more here that I want to get to. It says, I am entering my 44th year on the planet. I am seeing changes in my menstruation cycle and body. What can help me to deepen my connection with my body, and what can I do that leads to harmony? So a powerful threshold of life, right? Almost like the maiden moves and enters into the next stage of the mother. Eventually, the mother moves into the crone. And that doesn't mean one actually was a physical mother, you gave birth, but still that kind of arc of development that we find in that principle, eventually you will meet the crone, no matter what. So what does it mean to enter into that, to see those changes? How do you deepen the connection to it? What can you do to lead you towards harmony? Okay, so the first card coming up is death. Change, transformation, evolutions. What's lovely about death, and this is sort of in contrast to maybe like the Tower card, which also brings endings and changes and transformations, is this feels like the kind of slow evolutions that we see reflected in cycles of life, or the turning of the seasons, or as I mentioned, the movement and developments from maidenhood into the life of the crone. Death tells us that there is a natural principle of cycles of life, of creation, that involve movements, evolutions, growth, and then give way into their withering. So meeting this in a deeper way is sort of seeing the layers unpeeling within yourself. Maybe meeting this archetype of death and welcoming it, to your door, to say, I'm at this threshold. And we see that very subtle image here with the twin towers in the back, right? There's a threshold that we always meet when death is present. And what is it that you're noticing in yourself? Especially, with death, I wonder if there isn't a feeling of a little bit of mourning or grief or loss. Because as you enter into that next stage, there is a part of yourself that you might feel like you're leaving behind. Because with that kind of transformative evolution, you are no longer who you were before. Death brings that to us very explicitly and very, very clearly. So it's about meeting death here, meeting it consciously, welcoming it, understanding it as an unfolding transition into a new stage of life. The second card coming up is Temperance. We were just talking about this card. This to me, and what I love is that we actually have card 13 Death and card 14 Temperance. So if we're looking at the major arcana in the the literal movement from one card into the next, we're seeing a very direct connection here. Why does death lead to temperance? It's an interesting question to consider. To me, temperance allows us to take the parts of self that are dying in death and to bring them into the fold, so that what arises is something brand new than what you were. If there's grief, a feeling of loss, of death, so entering into this next stage of life, maybe fully leaving behind the last vestiges of youth, and moving into starting to meet the crone in these early stages. Temperance says you don't lose the maiden, you don't lose the mother. When the crone comes, she weaves those into herself, and there's a completely new version that rises in that rebirth process. So death is the recognition of the stage, of the threshold, of the loss, that this is a natural part of life. But temperance is the reminder that we don't just cut those parts away and they're gone forever. We don't just bury them and we never get to be with them or commune with them. Temperance tasks you to bring that into self, to see and stay connected, right, to what was, or what you were, and what you are becoming. And through that, you become this fully integrated being of temperance, which is sort of part maiden, part mother, part crone, right? Like she's this kind of like a rebus figure. It represents all of these dynamics folded into one another and rising as a completely new being. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. It was a really beautiful question, so thank you for submitting that. I'm gonna check the chat here really quick. Okay, another question here. I have two friends for 20 years. I feel we grew apart, but there is something holding me back to speak up about that. What is holding me back, and what is keeping me from acting on this matter? It's a good question. The times in life when we feel like we know that there's a block, we know that there's something kind of hiding under the surface, we know that maybe we're rubbing up against some shadow and we just don't know what it is. Those are wonderful times to turn towards tools like the tarot or other archetypal tools, divinatory tools, to break the conscious wall down and to see what's there. So what is holding this individual back? Two cards like immediately jumping out here, and I just want to double check the question here. What is holding me back? What is keeping me from acting? on this matter. The Four of Cups coming up in its reverse position here. It's going to show the card upright. You know, the Four of Cups is so interesting because it's the only other time, at least in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, that we see that kind of mysterious hand of the divine offering, in this case, a cup. You see it on the aces as well. And there's always this opening with the Four of Cups, something emergent, something new, an opportunity arising, and yet we are blind to it, or we're so stuck in a certain belief or a fixation. You know, what is that individual looking at in this case? These three cups right here. And actually, it feels very interesting. Let me look back. You have two friends. So it's like you and your two friends, right? The cups are very relational. Here are your connections. Here's everything that has been. And when the card is upright, and yes, we're very fixated on something and we're very caught in something, there's an easier capacity to be able to break out of the apathy, the brooding, the fixation, and to see what is emerging with this dynamic. When the card is reversed, there's tension here. So you've grown apart and something is holding you back from speaking up. I think what might be holding you back is the feeling that, how do I say this? It's like the not wanting to bring an awareness or break the tension of what is, because there's such maybe this feeling of what has been, what that connection was. And it's almost like when you realize there's an issue, it feels easier to just kind of hold back or sweep it under the rug, to not bring the kind of consciousness to it that might, yes, lead to some sort of uncomfortable conversation, to the feelings of sharing vulnerabilities, you know, the sadness that that brings. But oftentimes we almost fixate too much on what we think a situation is, and we don't actually see what it is around us that is truly a part of that dynamic. So this card in its reverse position, that Four of Cups reverse, says, you know, what's holding you back is, you know, this fixation on maybe like the relationship needs to stay the way it was, and that's how it makes sense for all of us, or that's how we connect. But the card says, with that emergent hand of the divine showing this new cup, that there is a new thread of relational connection, or at the very least, that kind of emotional flow that can be born from breaking the stalemate, essentially, of what is right now, right? Not wanting to address it. There is something here. There is a potential that can be met if you were to actually turn towards it and see it. What that might be, we aren't quite sure yet. Anytime those sort of ace-like hands arrive, there is a sense that it's not grounded into life. We don't know what it is, but oftentimes it brings something new. It expands us. It enlivens aspects once again. And the second part of your question is, what is holding you back? What is keeping you from acting on this matter? Very interestingly, the Page of Wands showing up as well. You would think that maybe a Four of Cups reverse might be paired with some other painful card, maybe like the Three of Swords. It's like, if I do this, you know, this kind of pain and, you know, wounding and suffering is what's going to come to light. But the Page of Wands is the card paired with this, and in conjunction, I wonder if recognizing that such a long, very deep and meaningful relationship as you've had with these two individuals, recognizing it, bringing it forth, speaking to it, what it might show is that almost, what I'm wondering here is like how you've changed and developed, and what is continuing to develop for you that might be part of the forefront. And what I mean by that is like sometimes when we go through our own life evolutions, we no longer really fit into the puzzle of relationship dynamics anymore. Like where you used to fit really nicely right here with a person, you start to change, or you transform, or shadows are met, and that changes the shape of you. And the way your relationships are no longer stay the same. So it's like you shift and things need to shift with you. And that's just the process of life. Everyone's kind of moving through this. And sometimes you grow together, other times you kind of split apart. The Page of Wands is like a beautiful card of the emergent, nascent parts of yourself that are expanding and growing, especially in this case with the Page of Wands, that would speak to developments both inwardly, especially so psychologically or of the psyche, that is really part of an emergent new journey, right? Something of an exciting path, uncharted dynamics, raw potential coming up that you get to take hold of and that get to kind of draw you into the exciting path of the wands. This is usually a really beautiful card to have, but it, in this kind of situation of, what's preventing you from talking to these individuals, what's holding you back, it makes me wonder if does talking to them mark very clearly that things have changed and you are on this path and you are going for it, because the pages are always the early stages of a new path emerging, and it's the engagement in it that we see that would lead to, in this case, a deeper connection to what inspires you, what excites you, what you're passionate about, what drives the excitement of energy in life. This might be a kind of moment that really makes that very clear. But to me, these cards don't say that those individuals can't be a part of it at all anymore. Sometimes it's the bringing things to the table that reignites the connection and forms like a new vessel of relationship. That might be part of what that emerging sort of Four of Cups shows. What could be born from creating a new vessel of relationship? Perhaps it will take you somewhere new, and the Page of Wands is a marker of that. Or maybe it reinvigorates and shifts and changes things because you get to see one another on new levels. So I hope that's helpful. Page of Wands and the Four of Cups reversed. Okay, just take a look here. All right, I think we are getting close to the end. There was another question I wanted to address before I close out today. So a member submitted a question. I just got the amazing Tarot Volatile Tarot deck, which I've seen you using before. I would be interested in hearing about how you use the extra cards in the deck, particularly the Alchemical Suit of Vessels. If you don't know what they're talking about, Tarot Volatile is a deck by I believe they're just independent artists who put out this work. Their company, this is in Latin, so I'm going to butcher it, Credo Quia Absurdum. They released this deck called Tarot Volatile. It's very beautiful. It really brings so much interesting art and symbolism. Here's the star card. Show you guys a couple. Here's the tower. They do reimagine some of the cards in different ways. You like the Hierophant here as the Pope, or the Strength card reimagined as the Virtue Fortitude. So there are some really nice options here. I'll show you a few minor arcanas as well. Here's the 10 of Cups. Let's see if we can pull another one. Here is the 8 of Swords. Anyways, so what this member is referring to is back in the archive. I don't remember what this audio post was called. It might just be called Tarot and Alchemy. I did a set of readings for members using the Tarot Volatile deck, but specifically with their 5th suit that they added called the Vessels, which is inspired by alchemy. As you know, I love alchemy. It is one of the main archetypal modalities that I utilize. And so it was very exciting for me to see this kind of marriage between tarot and alchemy in the form of suits. So here is the Vessel suits. There's the 10. Here is the 5 of Vessels. Here is the 7 of Vessels. Show you a couple of the court cards. Here's the Queen as the lunar queen, or the white queen of alchemy. see if I can grab another. Here is the page of vessels. So if you know much about alchemy, you might have heard of the manuscript Splendor Solace. Very famous, illuminated, so it's like very beautifully illustrated manuscript. And if you take a look at the vessel's suits, you'll actually notice that a lot of the symbolism and imagery that they use is from the manuscript Splendor Solace. They do say in the kind of instruction booklet that despite using the imagery from Splendor Solace, you're not necessarily meant to use the manuscript as a guide. They've just borrowed the symbolism, but I can't help but draw upon that rich manuscript in reading the cards, because each of those alchemical symbols that we see in the manuscript have so much rich depth and meaning and psychological application. So if you go back and listen to that audio episode, what I did was pull cards for people and read it using the meaning that the figure or the creators said, here's the meaning of Five of Vessels. And then I took the actual alchemical manuscript into consideration. As an example, say you were to draw this card. This is the Six of Pentacles. You see this individual in a tub, kind of like a hot tub. It's actually kind of like a vessel that he's being cooked in. There's fire. You have this bird that's emerging out. This implies certain alchemical operations from an alchemical perspective. When we see water and something is being cooked in it or bathed in it, right? There's some sort of water operation happening that's called solutio, right? And so there is direct alchemical meaning that you can draw from that. And then what we also see is, as this individual who's the prima materia, as he's being cooked, something is emerging out of his head. So something is sublimating. So there's something in the vessel itself that when has water or some sort of solvent applied to it and is heated, it starts to volatilize. Something breaks out of the material and starts to, rise to the top of the vessel, and it sublimates. So in this case, when you draw the Six of Vessels, yes, you could look at what the meaning is of what the creators wrote about it, but you could also consider that maybe it's calling you towards the operation of sublimatio, or perhaps there's some sort of solutio element that needs to be brought into your consideration. And that's the way to kind of weave a direct alchemical thread into the tarot reading. So that's the way that I like to use the vessels, because these are very potent images, with alchemical significance, and they can be married with the tarot meaning in a really wonderful way. So try that out. If you don't have the Tarot Volatile deck, I do recommend it. It's a wonderful deck. It's really provocative and beautiful and striking, and does a wonderful job of blending, tarot and alchemy. Okay, we've been going for a while now, so I'm going to close up here. Thank you guys all so much for attending. We'll consider another live stream for next month. Maybe we'll do readings again. Maybe we'll do, dream interpretation. If you have a request, let me know, and a recording of this will be up shortly. So thanks again, everyone, for attending. I'll see you next time. Bye.